Thanks very much, Sue. Okay, so I will kick us off. We want to talk about behavioral economics today, but I'm going to start with a quick summary of an important part of behavioral economics research, which is implicit research. I won't try and define what behavioral economics is as a whole because Stephen's done a good job of that. But implicit research is one of the important ways that we use behavioral economics in the market research world. And for us, implicit is all about what's under the surface, anything that you don't see just by looking or just by asking people. It's what we can't measure directly, but we have to infer indirectly. And a lot of it is about what we feel but don't know. It's about emotions and it's about what's intangible. So this presentation is going to be about how we set out to measure all of these intangible, implicit, indirect factors for the customers of a big hotel brand, which Lizzie works for, and she'll tell you all about, and how we did that in a way that goes beyond the standard or what's often used in the behavioral economics research world, which is the kind of small-scale qualitative exploratory research, and really scaled it up to a worldwide scale with a huge survey with tens of thousands of respondents. So this is what we think is behavioral economics' chance to really, well, get real and to take on some of the biggest type of challenges that are around in the research world. And Lizzie will tell you about what some of those challenges were.
So hello everybody, my name is Lizzie and I work for IHG, which stands for Intercontinental Hotels Group, and I work on the Holiday Inn brand family, so one of the best known hotel brands in the world. I'm sure there's none of you on the line who have not stayed at a Holiday Inn at some time in your life. It's a brand that's been around since 1952, and when it started it was a really simple brand proposition. Just give the American public the reassurance of a clean room, swimming pool for the kids, all at a great price. Together with its sister brand, Holiday Inn Express, these two brands are the biggest hotel brands in the world. We have 3,500 hotels globally, and we're always opening around 200 hotels a year. They're also incredibly important to IHG. They really are the powerhouse of IHG's revenue. We've got about 9 brands across the globe, yet these two generate 2/3 of IHG's total revenue. But both these brands today are competing in basically a highly commoditized marketplace. A bed in a room looks pretty much identical to any other bed in a room. So with the rise of online travel agencies such as Expedia and Booking.com, both these brands have seen their profit margins erode over the last few years. And as I said, both these brands really high levels of global recognition and certainly some affection. But I think the brand teams recognize that both brands needed a clearer focus on the customer needs to ensure that growth and revenue targets would continue to be met. So the global brand team came to me with 2 key questions. So firstly, what should each of the brands be focusing on to create differentiation? As I said, highly competitive marketplace. So really, how could each of these brands rise above almost what we call the sea of sameness of hotel rooms? They all look pretty identical these days. And secondly, what elements of the guest journey should they be focusing on to drive value? This is both emotional and commercial value. So what could we give the customer that would make them feel affection for the brand and therefore more likely to come back? But we're a money-making business. What, quite frankly, would drive revenue as well? What are guests prepared to pay for? So, of course, these are not questions that we can go and ask respondents directly, although I'm pretty sure we've come fairly close to trying. We do know it's difficult for people to accurately report and predict their own behaviour. So we knew that a kind of classic quantitative survey with a traditional, very rational conjoint exercise wasn't something that we wanted to do. I wanted to take advantage of all the behavioural economics knowledge and principles that we were aware of, that we understand that consumers are not these rational robots who make incredibly rational decisions. So we knew we wanted to use implicit techniques to get to the answers. So that's when we turn to Irrational for help.
Thanks, Lizzie. And as I think you all know, if you're listening to a session like this, and if you've just heard Stephen, these are not problems that are faced only by IHG. The whole research world has a similar problem, and that problem is that there's a problem with people. People don't understand themselves, they don't understand their own behavior or their own reasons for doing things, and sometimes, even if they want to, they can't tell you the truth. This is the insight really. Pardon me. This is the insight really at the heart of behavioral economics, that people don't know and they can't describe their own behavior, and this is exactly why we need indirect and implicit methods. There's a number of reasons for that. People want to manage their own image when they're speaking to an interviewer, but also their own self-image. Even if they're answering a survey privately, they have a way that they want to portray themselves to themselves. People are limited in their ability to introspect and understand their own reasons, especially in hypothetical situations. And when people do respond to your questions, if they respond to, for example, a rating scale, there are strong biases in how they respond. In the last presentation, we saw a list of those kind of 200 biases, but some of those biases affect the fact that people are either keen to agree or keen to disagree with statements presented to them, and those things vary, for example, by culture. So getting away from the biases in people's responses to surveys is one of the key goals here as well. And abstract questions like, tell me what you want from a hotel experience, are always going to give bad answers because people are just not that good at thinking abstractly. But implicit methods allow us to solve some of these problems. So we can deduce things indirectly instead of asking them directly. We can measure the unconscious, and that's what some of the tools I'll show you are about, measuring what's going on in people's unconscious mind that they are not aware of and that they can't tell you about. Also, we can, let's not say trick our respondents, but not be fully open with them about exactly what we want to measure, because telling them what you want to measure will cue them into giving you particular answers. And most importantly, probably, the implicit methods we use have to mirror the decisions that people make in the real world. So we have to simulate the situation and the decision process that someone has to go through if they're really choosing a hotel when we're asking them these questions online. And here are a few tips of how to do that. Asking the right questions is really important because there are certain questions people just can't answer. Recreating that in-the-moment mindset. And then this idea about the intangible is really important. We want to measure the intangible parts of, in this case, a hotel experience, but you can't ask about those directly. You have to ask about tangible things and work out from people's reactions what the intangible process underlying that might be. And pacing and rhythm is really important. You want to keep people engaged, you want to keep people moving, flowing through the survey at a pace that is both natural to them, keeps them interested, but also is natural to the pace and speed of the decision processes that they undergo in real life. So how do we do that? Well, there's a whole range of new tools that are emerging in the research world. And one that I'm going to talk about today is Behavioural Conjoint. So it looks a little bit like traditional conjoint. It's based on asking people to make choices between different products or different concepts with several dimensions to them. And anyone who's done a conjoint study will find the look of this quite familiar. But because it's done under time pressure and because it's done with a very specific design to the attributes and to the stimulus that goes into it, it allows us to measure the unconscious aspects of people's decisions and really get under the surface to all of those implicit factors that we want to measure. But, and this was very important to IHG, it also allows us to get a huge amount of data and to be able to measure things in a very quantitative way. And Lizzie, I think, will agree that IHG is a very quantitatively oriented company, and many of the people there want to have solid data, they want to see numbers, and so a traditional, well, traditional might not be the words, but the kind of qualitative exploratory approaches that have been used in behavioral economics research in the last few years weren't necessarily going to be convincing for the internal clients within IHG. So we set out to do that properly. We spoke to 30,000 people across 6 different countries and across all the regions of the world. And we created an immersive survey that put people in the position of remembering and imagining their last hotel stay. We asked them, we primed them by asking things like open-ended questions about what would be your ideal hotel room, or what was the worst experience you've had in a hotel. We presented them with choices, and I'll show you a close-up of that in a second. And we made sure that they always had limited time to choose, so that we got to the intuitive motives that really underlie people's decisions. And then we forced people to make a set of trade-offs, some of them positive trade-offs, which of these hotel rooms would you like better, and some of them negative, so which would be a worse thing to happen to you in a hotel stay, so that we tap into the underlying loss aversion and the really visceral aspects of people's decisions. This is what the behavioural conjoint looked like. So we can see, in this case, a choice between 2 different Holiday Inns with different decor, different designs, and some different features, as well as potentially different prices. And you'll see the bar at the top there, which is the timing bar, and we allowed people about 15 seconds to make each choice, which we found was a really good way to get people to both focus and to really concentrate, but also a way to stop them from over-rationalizing, so that we got to their intuitive, instinctive responses. I'm not going to talk over this slide, but if anyone wants to take a quick screenshot, this is a little summary of the differences between traditional and behavioural conjoint, so the advantages of using the behavioural approach. Obviously, this slide will be available in the recording afterwards if you haven't had time to screenshot it. And here are a couple of the other tools that we use, just because we want to make sure that this was a really holistic picture of the customer's decision making. We used a mobile ethnography tool to get to balance out the quantitative with a qualitative description of what people were experiencing while they were actually physically in the room. We used implicit ranking to get to the negatives of the hotel stay as well as the positive. Ultimately, we got to some really powerful findings, which Lizzie will take you through now.
Lovely, thanks, Leigh. So yeah, as Leigh alluded to there, IHG is a business that pretty much loves quantitative data. So we've certainly had some success with sort of educating our stakeholders about System 1 and behavioural economics, but it's seen as a very touchy-feely thing and something that you can only do in qualitative. That's why it was fantastic to bring through those principles in a quantitative piece of work. So we ended up, this project absolutely delivered on the core requirements of the business. We got quantitative data that, quite frankly, can be modelled, analysed, cut in about 100 different ways. With 30,000 respondents, plenty of flexibility there. We've now got a database of over 250 individual elements of the customer journey, and some of these are, quite touchy-feely things, like the first impression of a lobby, or just feeling safe and secure in a hotel. We can actually now put a dollar value on these slightly touchy-feely, intangible elements of the guest experience. And of course, we can now put a dollar value on more tangible items, such as the bedding or an ergonomic chair in the room, or a desk in the room. We've also able to look at the cost of not delivering a product or services to customers' expectations. So yes, customers absolutely expect a clean room. We can almost now put a dollar value on the cost when a guest walks into a room and they do not feel that the room is clean. So same but different. So some of the findings, look, some of them weren't surprising. We know that the Brits and the Chinese want hot tea at their hotel. Brits like it in their room, Chinese want it on arrival. That's great, we knew that. The great thing now was we're able to understand both the dollar value of this, that this simple ritual adds to this overall customer experience, and the damage that it does if it's not delivered or delivered poorly, something that we've never had before. And then we had some new insights that really hadn't come through in any previous research that we'd done. So this concept of convenience, it actually was really important around the world, really taps in with behavioural economic principles, make it easy, I don't want any hassle. But it's actually made up of lots of different elements. So for example, in China, convenience is very much based around the emotional importance of a breakfast ritual. So longer restaurant hours for breakfast was really highly valued in this market. But in the US, however, customers really valued long room service hours, so they could just relax and chill out and not have to go and engage, funnily enough, any social interaction, so they can just order room service. The US was the market that valued this the highest. And so we got some great insights out of our guests, but actually, of course, we mustn't forget about our 30,000 respondents. Feel free to have a look at some of the quotes there, but as you can see, I mean, this was not a short survey. I think it was almost nudging up to the half hour, despite our best intentions. But as you can see, some of the quotes were actually really positive. I think the timing element really almost created an element of gamification. So people are actually talking about that they actually enjoyed this survey, not something you tend to hear at the back of most conjoint studies, I'm sure. And I really like the quote around lots of information on choices, so I tended to pick the most important things, even if the rest weren't to my liking. That's exactly what we wanted them to do. And this was really evidenced by the difference between their implicit and explicit answers when identifying what was important to them. I'm not going to go through in some detail, but hopefully you can see that between both columns, there are some really clear differences. And of course, this is what we wanted to see. We wanted to shift people out of their system 2 rational thinking and make them use their system 1. So where has this taken us? Well, I've got to be honest, this is a piece of work that was done over a year ago now. And I think, quite frankly, it's still being widely used in the business. This piece of work's been really fundamental in driving the direction that our global brand teams are taking. We've identified key elements which have been rolled into what each brand is calling their key moment of truth. And these moments are currently being piloted in each of our 4 regions. This is the biggest pilot that IHG has ever done. And I think in a company like IHG, where you've got lots of brands, I think the ultimate measure of success is what all the other brands think of the work that you've done. So for example, Crown Plaza, I had a little look at what Holiday Inn brand were doing, saw how they were using the data, and have just recently replicated that same approach for their brand. And I know literally yesterday they just presented the results to the board. And we're also talking to the Intercontinental brand team about how they could use it in future. So I think, quite frankly, imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. So I'll hand over to Leigh.
So if you're thinking of using implicit methods in your research, what are the key things that are really important here? Well, the most important, the dominant theme here is it's about mirroring true decision making. This is one of the problems that research always has, or is always accused of, is, well, they say one thing in the focus group or they say one thing in a survey, but does that reflect what they will really do when they're buying my product or when they're at the grocery store shelf? And the answer is, with implicit research, yes, we can replicate the real decision process and understand what people would really do. People talk about value. They talk about, for example, how much is something worth, and they talk about will people choose, will people buy this product? These are concepts that are often kind of conflated in traditional research, and behavioral economics and implicit research allows us to pick those apart, understand the differences between them, and make sure that we can measure the relationship between what's something worth, what will somebody choose, and predict their real decisions. And of course, in a way that's actionable. This is another critique of some research. Well, that's a very nice insight, but what can I do with it? And I hope we've shown that in the case of IHG, we've been able to provide results and insights that are truly actionable and that they've been able to take forward and use and make, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investment decisions based on. So what ultimately, if implicit tools reach their full potential, will this allow us to do? Number one, to measure the intangible. The economy of the world is becoming more and more intangible. The more and more that people's material needs are met, at least in the richer countries of the world, then the more and more life becomes about meaning and about feelings and about the the intangible things. And implicit tools allow us to measure those and to help brands provide those for people. And to create experiential value. Again, this is a trend in the world economy that people are putting less value on material goods and possessions and more onto experiences. So if you want to provide experiences for people, then you need to use research like this to find out the experiences that they want to have. And fundamentally, our mission really is to make consumers happy. And implicit tools allows you to tap into what it is that really makes people happy and enable your brands to give it to them. Thank you very much. We would love to hear your questions now. And back to Sue. And